This is the Through the Whistle podcast. We're glad that you're joining us here. Got a lot of stuff to discuss. That's Jake Butt over there. He played college football at the University of Michigan, where he was an All-American tight end. I am Joshua Perry. I played my ball at The Ohio State University, where I was a national champion and a team captain. Jake, before we get into it, man, how we feeling? How we feeling about the Big Ten season so far?
I'm feeling great, baby. I'm feeling great. I am. You know, it always blows me away, Joshua. And I know it's coming every year. How slow the month of July feels. Like the month of July, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like we blinked. We were in August previewing the season. We blinked, and here we are in November. Like it just flies by every single year. I don't know what that is. I know Einstein said time is relative, but it still catches me off guard every year how fast the season goes.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like the application for the relativity thing, but it definitely, like, once the season gets going, you know what a great philosopher once said is time flies when you're having fun.
Wow.
Right. So I think that's really it. I can get into the relativity part of it later on for those of you who are interested in that kind of stuff. Probably not the right format for it. But Jake, I think we talk so much about the game between the lines, and certainly there are a lot of great things to review and preview for this edition of the show. But I wanted to kind of take it outside the lines here a little bit and do some pocket watching. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right. So a lot of coaches making a lot of money here in the Big Ten Conference. And The Athletic actually came out with this phenomenal article. They were basically kind of rating the coaches on the value that they provide. You know, there's a certain number that they get paid. Are they exceeding that? Are they on par? Are they falling short? Or kind of somewhere in between any of those categories. Now, the man who stands out the most, and we'll start with him, the biggest bargain in the Big Ten, Curt Cignetti, got his team undefeated, I believe, an 8-0 start, first time since the 1960s. He's getting paid $4.25 million. That is 15th out of the 18 Big Ten schools and 49th nationally. And I think there are a lot of ADs looking around right now that are mad that they got in bidding wars, and some other ADs looking around saying, how can we find value like that? Yeah,
that is absolutely remarkable. So last year we were talking about David Braun and how the expectations were nothing for Northwestern, and they had a great year, right? 7 wins, you beat Utah in your bowl game. Awesome year. They exceeded expectations. What do we call what Cignetti's doing right now? Do we even have a word in the English dictionary about this? Because to be the 15th highest paid coach in the Big Ten and to be producing the way he's producing is almost unheard of. And what's really impressive is I wish we're probably headed towards a world where this is the case, but it should be total investment towards the football team, because it's the head coach, but it's also the coach's salary and the commitment from NIL. I got to imagine Indiana is sitting there right in that bottom quarter of total investment into the football team. Yeah. And Cignetti at that $4 million plus number is squeezing every drop of value out of it for the Hoosiers. It's unbelievable. Seriously unbelievable what we've been seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to pull up the assistant salary pool, it's like you said, it might be one of the lowest in the Big Ten. Would not be shocked there. But he's also riding with a lot of guys who's been with him in the past. Brought many coaches over from JMU there. One of the coordinators I'm very familiar with, he was the GA when I was playing at Ohio State in 2013. So didn't necessarily take him super long to become a really high-profile coordinator. That defense is playing extremely well, but this is also a guy who's probably fortunate to be making whatever he's making at Indiana, because when I talked to Curt Cignetti, he said he brought Bryant Haynes on to, his first head coaching gig, and the dude was making like, $8,000 a year at a real small school, like, something crazy like that. And so the idea here is I think he's got the right mentality. We talk about it with the players, but the coaches are here for the right reasons too. They're not just trying to cash in on checks.
That's a great point and great story. We got to talk about that sometime. Is Bryant Haynes and Shanahan, their offensive play call, like they've all been together for so long. Like loyalty is rare in this game. Cignetti, he's just cutting against the grain in every single thing he does right now. Everyone is zigging. He's zagging. He's doing it his way. Man, $4 million is a lot of money. Talk about the value the Hoosiers are getting with Cignetti right now. It's awesome. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, now there's a different tier of coaches here, and we'll talk about some of the guys at the top. You've got Dan Lanning at $8.2 million, fourth in the conference. You got James Franklin at $8.5 million, third in the conference. You got Ryan Day at $10.02 million, that's second in the conference there. I mean, these guys certainly have shelled out for results, right? I think if we were to look right now, you'd say that Dan Lanning is likely maxing out his salary the best out of the three. I do think it's wild. You talk about total investment. I'll go with my alma mater here for a sec. You got a $10 million head coach. You got two coordinators that are making $2 million apiece. You've got a number of position coaches that are making at least $1 million. And you got an NIL slush fund that seems like it's endless. When they need money, they can go out there and get it. At what point do you think you kind of look at the I don't know, the returns, right? Like, and say, okay, like, do we need to spend all of that money? Because I think that the people in Columbus are probably looking right now and saying, we put in the investment. You already got 1L. It's a big one coming up on Saturday. Like, what more can we give you?
I think I'm looking at this slightly different, where I don't think they're saying, do we need to spend all this money? I think Ohio State is prepared to spend whatever it takes to win. Their question is Ryan Day the guy to take these resources and extract the wins and championships out of it? I think Buckeye, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. You know that they're perfectly fine spending 30 plus million, 35, 40 million a year if it means they win. That's why the loss to Oregon is so frustrating. That's why the season is like basically hanging by a thread this weekend versus Penn State.
I guess my point is, like, do you actually have to, though?
Do you have to is a fair question then. Do you have to?
Just because you can, I don't think people are necessarily turning down Ohio State because they're not getting paid $2 million more a year than the next guy. I certainly don't think coordinators, unless they're leaving to become head coaches, but I don't think your coordinators are leaving for other coordinator jobs because you're not paying them $2 million. And I do think there's this question about, like, diminishing returns. You know, when do you pay somebody so much that you might not be maxing out the value, right? For Kirby Smart, who gets paid $13 million down there at Georgia, you're clearly paying for national championships.
Yeah.
What are you paying for in this scenario? You're paying to say that you can pay, right? Like, I think there's a level of prestige for some of these universities in saying, screw it, we got the cash, so we're going to spend it.
So why do you drive, or what? I'm not you, but why does someone drive?
You could say me. Why do I drive a BMW?
Yeah, why? Because
I can, because I work hard and I like the car.
And it's German engineering, right? But I don't think you don't care about the engine, right? Like,
I kind of do. You know, I like having
it is nice when you
turbo,
put
you know, 8-cylinder, 532 horsepower.
I got a V8 in my Jeep now, so don't sleep on me. I think I got 500 plus horsepower too. So we're gonna have to test those babies out.
Yeah, man. No, I get what you're saying though, right? Like, I do think that there is this, when you are a blue blood, I think the expectation is that you behave as a blue blood, regardless of if there's waste that comes along with it. Right. And I'm not necessarily saying they're wasting money, right? Like, this is not to say that these guys haven't earned the right to make that type of money. But it's also to say, like, I don't know if that's necessarily what the open market would legitimately command. I think Ohio State's comfortable saying we're paying these guys because we like paying them.
And I think this year too is unique, where I mean, gosh, man, it has felt like this season was the season. It felt like the stars truly aligned for Ohio State. It's a veteran roster. It's Jim Knowles year after year. Now he's comfortable. It's his system. Oh my gosh. Then you go get Chip Kelly. Here comes Jeremiah Smith, and he's everything you thought he would be and more. It felt like going into this season, it could be special. So I'd imagine Michigan last year, the willingness to go spend and get that thing that you're chasing edges at that point.
Right.
The willingness to spend a little bit extra. It's more approachable when you feel like you really have a chance at something.
All right, let's go talk about the Michigan thing then, because Sharon Moore, I think his salary is 6.5. I'm scrolling to try to find it, so bear with me here.
You're right.
It's $6 million, and
Yeah.
so that's 13th in the conference. And I think they said essentially, like, we really like you. Certainly $6 million is not a small amount of money. Also, you don't have a resume as a head coach, so we can't do entirely too much. They did give Wink Martindale, who's got a long resume, a ton of money, rumored to be the highest paid coordinator in college football. Up there, 1, 2, or 3, right? Like, we're splitting hairs at that point. And I do think it's intriguing how that balance also works, where Michigan certainly was at the 11th hour, like, Jim Harbaugh will pay you what was the number, $12-13 million.
Yeah. It was an escalator clause. It was the highest, would make you the highest paid with an escalator clause.
Yes,
so whatever that would be.
And Nick Saban had a deal that was like that,
Yeah.
where he had to be 1, 2, or 3 on that list. And if he wasn't, his contract would bump him up automatically. This is crazy business, y'all. But now you're sitting here with Sharon, and I do think it is intriguing. Like, you look at Deshaun Foster out there at UCLA, certainly feels like they're more interested in basketball than football at this point. He's a first-year head coach, $3.25 million salary. Again, these are not small numbers, but I do think the approach on the resume of being a first-time head coach is one of the biggest ways that these athletic departments can save money.
Oh, yeah. It's a what have you done for me lately sport for the coaches, for everybody. And, for Sharon, part of this too, a lot of this, JP, is leverage. And it even applies to Wink Martindale. So you hire a first-time head coach, but you have to give him resources. Like, you have to give him a chance to win. They like the Baltimore Ravens scheme. Oh, okay, here's Wink Martindale, the godfather of the scheme. So, like, Wink, naturally, his agent has a ton of leverage to say, you need me more than I need you. That's how some of these salaries come about. And that's also how, Kirby comes about, right? Or Dan Lanning comes about, right? For Sharon, I think it's a fair dollar sign right now. Part of the reason he's making more money than Cignetti is in his first year as a coach in the Big Ten is because of the Michigan brand. Part of it is because he beat Ohio State and beat Penn State and beat Maryland last year, right? So I think Sharon's pretty fair, and it's on him now to say, if you win at these big places, you don't make 7 figures, you start to make 8 figures, and some of those contracts actually are upwards of 9 figures.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Like, I mean, we saw the Jimbo Fisher thing that certainly did not go well, but there was a lot of money involved there. Mel Tucker, not to bring up some crazy things, but you want to talk about big old contracts. Like, we've seen them. And I do think there is a point with some of these athletic directors, athletic departments, where they do say, we can't be too involved in the rat race, because you see what happens when it goes wrong. Lincoln Riley might be one of the next ones there. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but, from sources that I've spoken to, the buyout is Jimbo Fisher like. I'll put it in those terms. It is a real problem if they wanted to make a move, but depending on what this season could be like, Lincoln Riley, by the way, highest paid coach in the Big Ten, over $10 million a year. Depending on what the end of this season looks like, they might be regretting the fact that they ever had such a large salary and such a big buyout attached to that contract. And I think, Jake, this is a good transition for us to actually talk about how that season could end. So, let's take a look here. You've got a 4-4 USC team. They got to get 2 more to get to a bowl game. They have remaining Washington, which that's a game that you're going to be on the call for the Big Ten Network. For the folks who aren't familiar, Jake Butt does the A game for BTN, does a phenomenal job, if I do say so myself. But they've got Washington, they're off. They've got Nebraska, they got UCLA, and they play Notre Dame, who is now playing some great football. What is the likelihood that they make a bowl game here?
They have to win this game. Like, gosh, this game is critically important because, man, they're in the same boat that Michigan was last week, where you look at that schedule, the teams you just mentioned, going to be hard to find 2 wins. So this is a winnable game. They have to do it. And you and I, we see Lincoln in that situation in a different light. You are applying pressure to him heavily. I'm saying, hey, I'm not
applying pressure to anything. The $10 million is applying pressure. My pressure is completely in alignment with how people are getting paid.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're making that much, yeah, you know what? We can't be talking about, are you going to make a bowl game or not?
Yeah, I have zero desire to be sitting here talking about USC getting ready to play in the Holiday Bowl.
So, we had our coach meetings with them today, and he has to view it this way, but I understand what he's saying, where part of this is, hey, they have to get better every year. The defense was atrocious last year. Hey, they're improving. They're making progress. Progress isn't linear. And he said, one of the perspectives is they've had a tough schedule. I mean, starting with LSU, it's been a tough schedule. They have had the chance to win every single game. And at one point, were what they do, the odds to win in game, like they're like a 90% chance in the fourth quarter of every single game this year. So it is fair to say that with this schedule, his team last year and the year prior, they couldn't say that. They couldn't say that they were going to win every single game. So in some light, what I'm saying is they have made progress because they put themselves in position to win every game. And yet in the same exact light, you got to win the games. You got to finish. They're giving it away in the fourth quarter. So they're kind of at this inflection point. This is where this Washington game is so critical, because something does have to change. You do have to find a way to win these games. You have to find a way to win on the road. They've struggled on the road as well. What this game is about, and what every other game you mentioned on their schedule are about, is Lincoln and those $10 million. They have to start to build some momentum going into next season. They got a younger team. They got a ton of guys that are playing right now that will be back next year. I like the way their roster is headed, but you need the results to back that up. That's your foundation.
I'm there with you. And frankly, I've been so negative on USC. I'm going to continue the negativity here. I think they take an L on Saturday, right? Playing at Washington.
It's a tough place to play.
It's Washington, a great environment. No, and I'm telling you, people who have been up there, I have not had the fortune of going there yet, but that is a hell of an environment. Not easy to play there. They're hosting Nebraska. Okay. I think they lose that game. I think Matt Rule is a better coach. I think he's going to have his team
at home.
What do you mean at home?
Coming out there?
Yes, bro. All of the Cornhuskers who have never been out to Hollywood are going to be on a bird to go out there, and we know the Coliseum ain't like that as an environment.
Yeah.
I do not.
It's got to be a home game for Nebraska. I mean,
it might be.
Yeah,
it might be. They're going to lose that one. They're going to beat UCLA, and they're going to lose to Notre Dame.
So you're talking 5-7.
I'm talking 5-7. I'm talking extra time.
A lot of what I'm saying, a lot of what I'm saying is, I think USC is a much better team than their record. They had 7 of their 11 starters injured last week versus Rutgers. They've been beat up. No excuses, okay? No excuses.
Versus beat up Rutgers?
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. And it's Rutgers on a Friday night traveling from coast to coast. They win. Okay. Well, you'd hope so. I think their offensive line is getting better. Like, I think that offensive line is growing and getting better. I'll give them credit there. Woody Marks, special.
No, he's really good. He's a very good player. He's running back for USC. He's a very good player. Here's the thing, Jake.
They need to run the ball more, actually. Woody has the 4th most carries of any individual back, but USC is in like the bottom quarter of runs as a team per game. That's what's hurting them, like when it comes to finishing games. Is this real? Let me ask you this as a defender. We talk about, Michigan leaning on teams throughout the game. Like, hey, we're going to run it in the first and second quarter, and that's going to exhaust you in the fourth quarter. Do you actually feel that that's real from a defensive player's perspective? Because I feel like that's something that's limited USC's ability to finish games, that they're just not physical in the first and second quarter, and they don't gas teams.
I'm going to try to find a stat here to give you the example, because yes, it is real.
Okay.
It's a real problem. It happened to us in 2015 against Michigan State. Yeah, that was pretty much the story of the game for us. Is it got late in that football game, and we could not get stops. All of the runs became leaky. And what I mean when I say leaky yardage, leaky runs, is when I'm watching a defense and I'm evaluating as a former linebacker, I like to see guys get hit and go backwards. I like to see guys get hit and go to the side. I don't like to see guys get hit and then fall forward and get an extra yard or an extra half a yard, because that really does add up. Okay. And so we're playing them, and we'd have them in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, and they would get 2.5 or 3.5 yards. And that's the kind of stuff that I don't know what you want to do. It really kills you in that type of situation. This was also, looking at the box score of this, my God, one of the nastiest stat games that an Ohio State team.
Because you guys didn't run the ball. You had Zeke, and you didn't run the ball that game, right?
Yeah,
like that
ran it for 86 total yards, 29 attempts. Most of them were JT attempts. We also did not throw the football very well at all. 9 for 16 for 46 yards.
You guys have like 120, 130 yards on the day?
Dog, we had 12 draft picks playing in that game. And all these draft picks, by the way, were 4th round or higher.
From that next year, right? Not
from
totally.
The guys who left that team and entered the draft after that season. We had 12 of them.
Yeah.
That got drafted in 2016. All 4th round picks or higher. 5 first rounders played in this game. That is bad. They had 203 rushing yards, but it was 51 rushing attempts and 4 yards per. So they never
51.
Really killed us with explosives. But what they did was they just kept falling forward.
51 rushing attempts. That's it. And that's where what I see, and this is where it's on Lincoln, okay? Because actually Woody, they've had success running the ball. They have a pretty solid running game. It's particularly when Woody's in there. And I like their tight end, Lake McCree. I think him getting back healthy helps this run game as well. But it's on Lincoln because what Michigan State did was stay committed to the run. And I think I look at D'Antonio, it's actually a perfect comparison. D'Antonio is a junkyard dog, underdog mentality, very smart too. But I think D'Antonio, he got excited by punching someone in their face.
Yeah, he did.
That's why they run it 51 times. I look at Lincoln leading in the 4th quarter of every single game this year. And he's a brilliant offensive mind that cannot be denied. The Heisman track record, the offensive statistics, they can't be denied. What happens, though, is you can get bored with 4 or 5 yard runs. D'Antonio was going to stick with that 4 or 5 yard run into the 4th quarter and lean on you. Into the 4th quarter, Lincoln is still calling, at least I believe what I'm seeing on tape, is RPOs. That's not an attitude. RPOs is winning with finesse of, if you go here, we'll go there. And I love RPOs, but there has to be an attitude to separate and finish games. RPOs are finesse. You gotta in the 4th quarter, it's about punching someone in their mouth.
Yeah, I think there's also this idea too about like certain kind of older school football guys, and Marcus Satterfield had this comment, and I defended him. And then we haven't even really gotten to that part, but what he did to his offense at the end of the game against Ohio State, to me, lost the game there. But during the week, this man was like, he was asked, how many yards per play would you like to average? And he said something like 4 to 6 yards per play, which if you're a football person, you would understand what he's getting at. Now, if you average between 4 and 6 yards per play, you'd be somewhere in 80, 90, 100 because the explosives factor in there. But you don't necessarily call plays to call explosives. Like, you don't just dial up plays to be a 20-yard, a 40-yard, a touchdown every time. You kind of have to dial the plays up to get you 4 yards, right? Like on first down, you want to call a play in a typical 1st and 10 situation, 1st and 10 from the 25. You want to call a play that gets you into 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 4, right? Like 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line, you're not dialing up your best shot. Maybe you get across midfield and that's what you want to do. Maybe you get into the high red zone and you say you want to jump on them and score a touchdown. I get that. But the old school guys have mastered this idea of not getting bored, calling regular plays that work. And I think there's this like younger group of coaches that's like been up and coming where they get into these moments and they're like, my play calling, my offense is my signature. Yeah. And I need to dial up a kill shot right here. And that's probably not the right play.
Yeah. It's challenging because, you know, especially when you're a coach, this is where to tie it all together, when you're making $10 million a year, like Lincoln, you're making 10 million because of your past, which is the finesse and the play calling. So you have to overcome yourself in a sense. You have to overcome this narrative and perspective you're carrying with you. And you're remind yourself you're making $10 million. More than that, you're making $10 million to win, which means tweaking and adjusting and getting into running the football. So it'll be interesting to see this week what Lincoln does and how the run game comes. You know, in our meetings, he said like the keys to the game. I was pretty surprised to hear it. He has to run. He said they got to run the ball and they got to stop the run. I'm like, that sounds like a Big Ten coach. So it'll be a fun one to watch this weekend.
I feel like every coach knows to say that, though. Just,
right.
You know.
But anyway, hey, at least he's saying it. You know, it's not saying, hey, we got to beat him with scheme and RPOs. So
I agree. It'd be really alarming if he said that they had to scheme their way into victory. All right. Let's talk about the team that they're getting ready to play. So Washington, they're sitting at 4 wins as well. USC, number 3, Penn State, UCLA, and number 1, Oregon left on the schedule there. It's going to come down to this game against USC. Yeah. And I'm not going to put you in a position to pick, right? Yeah. So I will pick here for you. Okay. They're going bowling. Okay. I think they'll beat USC. UCLA should be a guaranteed win for them. And then I'm curious, like they got to go to Autzen, but Dan Lanning has had the trouble against rivals. And I'm curious to see what that game actually looks like from a game flow, from a game control type of standpoint.
What's important too, it's true for USC and like Washington. They are a good team that has beat themselves, and they're much better again than their record too. Like they agree 18 penalties versus Washington State. Like they have beat themselves. Rutgers, they outgained Rutgers by like 200 yards, but missing field goals and penalties in the red zone. So when you talk about a rivalry game, say they clean some of these self-inflicted mistakes up, that could be a game, and all of a sudden, who knows what happens when it's a one-score game in the fourth quarter.
All right, let's move on to another team here that's sitting at 4 wins. It's Michigan State, coming off that L to Michigan last week. To finish off their schedule, you got to play the Hoosiers. It's one of the games that you'll be able to see on Peacock this weekend. I'll be on the pregame for that one. Then you've got Illinois after that, Purdue, and you've got Rutgers. So what are your predictions when it comes down to this?
I like the way that schedule lays out for them. Obviously, yeah. I think the Rutgers game is going to decide it. But to me, Jonathan Smith has been overshadowed. We've talked a ton about Indiana. We've been captivated by, you know, what Nebraska's doing with Matt Rule. Are they good or not? Of course, we're captivated by the big brands, as we always are. But quietly, Jonathan Smith is building, and he's digging holes and pouring concrete and building a strong foundation. Their game versus Iowa off the bye week was the best offensive line performance I've seen, man, since before COVID. They had to just have not had that. They went through spring games where they've had to cancel the spring game because they didn't even have 10 offensive linemen, right?
Yep. And
they go out there and run for over 200 yards. Then that very first drive versus Michigan, I'm sitting up there in the booth and I'm wondering, can they do it again? Right at them, man. 3rd and 9, they converted, I think, 3 or 4 3rd and longs by running the ball into the teeth of the Michigan defense. Yep. This is a team that's ascending, and it doesn't mean it's going to look like this. It might look like this, but they are ascending, and I think they get to 6, and I think that's going to be really important for Jonathan Smith to get those 15 bowl practices. Every rep counts with that young quarterback, too, and Aiden Childs.
Agree. And I think quietly their defense has played extremely well. The way that they game plan, really outside of the Oregon and the Ohio State games, I think that their defense has been pretty stout. I mean, the game plan they had to stop Caleb Johnson, who's one of the best running backs in college football, certainly one of the best in the Big Ten. I mean, they had a plan for that. They might have given up a little bit in the pass game this past week against Michigan, but the more I think about it, I think they were like, we're going to try to stop the run here. Yeah. And they did a pretty good job of limiting Michigan's running game. I think that they have an opportunity. Certainly this Indiana game, I'm going to pick Indiana in. All right. But they do have an opportunity to beat a team like Illinois. I think that's likely. They better beat Purdue. Like I'm expecting them to do that. And Rutgers, like, there's going to be a lot on that game because I think it's going to be Rutgers' shot to get to a bowl. Yep. But they're probably going to be favored. They're playing it at home. Like, it's a big deal.
Even those Oregon and Ohio State, they just turned the ball over a ton.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Like, they've beat themselves. Gosh, the defense played good in those games. They're just backed up and on the field all game because Childs kept turning the ball over.
Yeah, man. All right. And then final one we'll take a look at here is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. As a team that you and I both thought could win 9 games this year, we were seduced into believing that they're 4-4 currently, 1-4 in the Big Ten, 4-game losing streak. There's a lot of 4s up there, and it ain't good for us. Got Minnesota, they got Maryland, they've got Illinois, and they've got Michigan State. At Maryland, at Michigan State there. I'll just go ahead off the top. Minnesota's playing very good football. They might be the 5th best team in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah.
But
that's
going to be tough.
But beatable.
They are beatable.
Very beatable.
A game that they could win. Maryland, it depends on who you get. But it's a game that they could win.
Yeah.
Illinois, I feel the same. These are all matchup opponents to me.
Yeah, yeah.
They've got a shot in each of these 4 games.
They can go 4-0. They can go 0-4. You can sell me on any of it.
Anywhere in between.
They're on a bye week this weekend, right?
Yes, they are.
They are beat up. This
is the right time for a bye week.
They have been plagued with injuries, man. I've heard Kyle Monunga has been playing with serious injuries this entire season. Had to come out of the game even, I believe, versus USC for a bit.
That's a tough sucker right there.
Tough, but man, how he can't carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. So a lot of this is going to depend on how healthy they are down the stretch of the schedule. But it's just sad to me, Joshua, to think about where they were 4-0 to start the season, the opportunity that they had, only to drop game after game after game after game. It's tough. I really hope they get to 6 for Greg's sake and for the team's sake and for Kyle Monunga, a guy like him, Aaron Lewis, a guy that's been in the program. Those guys.
Aaron Lewis is great.
So
yeah, and Kyle Monunga has worked his tail off, and you and I are both big fans of Greg Schiano. And the way he's built that thing and embraced being at Rutgers, he was there before, was successful, and so I'm gonna come back and do it again.
Yeah.
And he's a very good ball coach, tough ball coach, a grinder, very good ball coach. All right. Let's change up directions here. So we've got some teams, notable teams that are going on the road this week. Oregon making a long trip to Ann Arbor. Yeah. You got Ohio State making the trip down the single windy road into State College to play Penn State in a nooner.
You guys drove to that?
No, hell no.
Okay, I didn't know. All right.
But, it is that long road to get in there, though.
Yes. It's
just one road in, one road out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the road environments and the preparation and how much of your process, game week and game day, was affected when you went into an environment that you knew was 100,000 plus and it was going to be crazy.
Well, it matters a bunch for offense because it disrupts your entire communication. It disrupts your ability to get off on the snap quickly. It makes everything more challenging. It limits your ability to communicate cleanly with your sideline. Like it requires maturity. It requires discipline. It really puts an emphasis on your preparation throughout the week. And a lot of this too is it puts on, can you run the ball? Like, can you do things to take the crowd out of the game? You could just think about this. If you're cheering for your team at home, if the away team comes in and puts together a 10-play drive, converting third downs and running the ball, you're not screaming that entire drive, So it's all these things that come into play. And I think veteran teams that settles me a little bit. So Oregon with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, with the way they've played here in the middle part of their season, the way they handled the challenge of Purdue on the road, I feel good about the fact they'll be prepared going into this game. I feel the same for Ohio State, except for one thing, Joshua, the offensive line, and to bring it back to the snap count and getting off on the snap count. Penn State, I think Joel Klatt said this on his podcast, and I've seen it on tape a ton. Abdul Carter he reminds me of Von Miller in terms of the get off, where that dude's going to have at least one offsides every game.
Right.
But he's shaving milliseconds off his stance. And man, as an offensive lineman on the road, you're not going to be able to hear the snap count. It's going to be hard to protect these guys. Like, that is something that's something tangible that really can affect your ability to succeed on the road.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that. So, me and you are on the same team, Jake. We go out on the road. So, our offense is on the field, right? You can't hear anything. They're screaming, quarterbacks trying to make audibles at the line of scrimmage. You're staring at the ball, trying to figure out when it's time to go. Okay. While you're doing all of that, we're on the sidelines trying to make adjustments, and we can't hear a damn thing either because they're screaming so hard trying to mess you up. It's messing us up on the sideline.
Never thought of that.
Right. And so there's this back and forth where when you're on defense on the field, it might be a little bit easier to get your communications in and to operate more normally. But when we come off to the sideline, our adjustments are so hectic because we're basically like face to face trying to speak to each other so we can communicate what we want to do. So that's a big challenge there. The other thing I will say, and you mentioned ways to take the crowd out of it. I'll tell you this for sure. Block a punt. See if that doesn't take the crowd out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, score on a defensive play and see if that doesn't take the crowd out of it. TFLs take the crowd out of it, right? Like, interceptions take the crowd out of it. I think there are ways that you can turn the game with these momentum swinging plays, and it is deflating. And we've all been there. I was there, played at Penn State a couple times, played in Ann Arbor a couple times. These are huge stadiums, over 100,000 people in either one of them. And I can remember moments where the crowd was quiet.
Yeah.
Because we made a play. Yeah. Right. And so I think that kind of has to be your mentality too. At least on defense, our mentality was like, can we make a play that makes everybody shut up?
When the crowd gets quiet too, the crowd, it works both ways. Like, when you're at home and the away team is stealing your momentum, like, the crowd gets quiet, that increases your nerves. That makes things
you're anxious.
Feel, yes. So it can work against you. The best teams know how to use that, and they steal it from their opponents.
All right, so let's talk about the probably the biggest matchup of the week then, with Ohio State traveling to play at Penn State. You mentioned the offensive line issues. There was some of the media in Columbus said that Donovan Jackson, who plays the left guard spot, looks like he's probably going to kick out. Ryan Day said Zen Michalski's trending to not playing in this ball game. So there's going to be a shuffle on the offensive line. They did not run it well at all. And this tracks back to the second half of the Oregon game when the starting tackle, Josh Simmons, got hurt. For Penn State, a Drew Aller issue, maybe. People said that he was going through drills at practice. I think it's trending toward the fact that he's going to give it at least a chance. We'll probably play in this game. I mean, where do you see this thing going? Which side of this do you feel more confident in?
Penn State, honestly. Penn State, I think this is a big deal to be losing your left tackle. Josh Simmons was playing like their best offensive lineman.
He was the draft people were starting to talk about him in a very favorable light.
Yep. And I know Donovan Jackson is a stud offensive lineman, but that's a different world playing out on the edge, man. It's
you're insulated at guard, right? Like,
yes.
You got guys on both sides. They need to that point, chips.
Yep.
Tight end got to be there to Tiger, like the whole deal.
But the problem is Penn State brings pressure. So the guy that's chipping is going to have his own man to block, most likely, So I don't know how they're going to run the ball. I don't, because I would have been confident that they'd be able to run it in the second half versus Oregon. I would have been confident that they'd be able to run it versus Nebraska. So I don't know really. They tried. They kept knocking, and to their credit, they kept knocking and trying and trying. What this feels like a game. I'm excited to see the young fellow, Jeremiah Smith, because one thing Penn State does, they play man-to-man one-on-one coverage. They don't disguise it. It's cover one.
Yeah.
Their best game plan is going to be taking some shots to Jeremiah down the field and see if he can put the team on his back.
It's actually kind of crazy watching Penn State defensively because they give you the answers to the test when you walk up to the line of scrimmage.
It's crazy.
They don't disguise. Middle of the field closed, you're getting cover 1 or cover 3, and you can probably tell whether it's cover 1 if they're pressed because they love to press.
Yeah.
They put the 2 safeties out there. They're playing cover 2, and there's not a ton of in between.
Yeah.
Like it is very basic, and they let you know. I have this thing though. I think that Penn State secondary is not a very fast secondary.
I
don't think they have elite speed guys back there.
I called their game versus Kent State. So I was watching the game versus Bowling Green the week prior. And as I'm watching this, I'm used to seeing one corner from Penn State, like Joey Porter, right? Where you turn on the tape and you're like, man, that's a long, rangy corner. Man, he's going to play in the NFL. And I don't know that they have that elite corner, that elite shutdown corner. I think they have a lot of guys that are pretty good,
Yeah.
I don't know that they have that dude that's going to run with Jeremiah down the field, to your point. And they normally have that, which is key for their system of being aggressive in playing one-on-one coverage.
Yeah, it's intriguing to me. I think I'm leaning toward the Penn State side of things as well, just objectively. I don't know. Watching Ohio State did not really inspire confidence in me last week, and it feels like they're questioning themselves a little bit. I do think that being in Columbus is certainly hard. For folks who don't know, Columbus, Ohio is a top 15 city in America in terms of population, and they have a pro hockey team that not a lot of people are really that interested in, and they've got a professional soccer team that people are interested in, but not the way that people are for Ohio State. The media is all geared toward the Buckeyes. Like it's hard to be 18 to 23 years old and be there when people feel like things aren't perfect. And I think it's seeping in a little bit. So going on the road sometimes the best thing when that's happening, because it makes you do like this as a team. You kind of get in the foxhole together. The only path I think for Ohio State and their offense being able to be productive enough is Will Howard actually has to take this game over.
Yeah.
He threw the deep ball well in the last game. He's got to make great decisions with the football. Can't turn it over. He's got to run the daggone thing.
Yes.
He has to create the extra gap.
Yep.
Right. Like he has to be a guy who affects the numbers in the run game.
This has got to be a Chip Kelly masterclass to that point. Like that's the next level. This has got to be a Chip Kelly masterclass. And, Will Howard had a great clip in his presser this week from Philadelphia, said he grew up a Penn State fan. They didn't offer him. I grew up in Columbus to our viewers who don't know me. I grew up in Columbus. I grew up a Buckeye fan. Ohio State didn't offer me. And I can tell you, man, I anytime I needed extra fuel, I reminded myself of that. Like it's not healthy to go through your day-to-day life full of spite and anger. It's not healthy. Don't listen to Joshua. It's not healthy. You're gonna have heart problems. In the game of football, it's very, very healthy. So I'm excited for Will too, man, because you look at his career, like, he kind of, lost the job last year versus Kansas State. Definitely took some heat this offseason. Like, oh, that's the guy Ohio State's going with. And yet he's been a baller. He's been competitive. That game versus Oregon, he was plenty good enough to win. The best quarterback performance in a big game since CJ Stroud, right? Like he's been good enough to win. And yet in Columbus, you have to be even better in this game.
I will say, like, to the fans' credit in Columbus, they've given him his flowers. I love the fact that he's a true competitor. You can see that he wants to get after it and he's trying to lead. And like, there are a number of shortcomings to his game that we could harp on, but I'm not going to do that because I feel like when they have a competitor at quarterback, they got the best shot to win ball games. All right, we're closing in on just about a minute left here. I wanted to ask you, we're getting the first college football playoff rankings next week. We have no idea how the committee is going to behave in this 12-team era. But we do have 4 teams in the Big Ten that are in prime position to be in the college football playoff this year. Do we see all 4 of them in the initial ranking?
Okay, let's play it out. We see Oregon, absolutely. I'm assuming Indiana wins this weekend, so we see Indiana. I do think Indiana. I think the committee respects what Indiana is doing, and I believe we will see Indiana just as a principle. Where it gets interesting, if Ohio State loses, Joshua, I'm concerned for your Buckeyes. If they're
not going to be in the first one if they lose.
How could they be, right? Because who's their marquee win?
They don't have one.
They don't have one. They don't have one. And they struggled versus a Nebraska team that Indiana ran off the field. Yeah. So I think Penn State could lose a close game and still be in close. They might be the 12th team.
I mean, if Penn State loses, how far do you think they drop? I don't really think they drop past probably like 8 or 9. I mean, if they get ran off the field, maybe, but like I don't see a scenario where they drop past 8 or 9.
Then Indiana would have to jump them then, right?
I would say I would take an undefeated Indiana over them. I think that should matter.
That's where I was thinking. And I guess it depends on what other teams do. You know, if every other team wins, including Indiana, I think maybe you could swap places with Indiana or, you know, but who knows? It could be chaos. This is what it always is. It's, you know, these weekends, it could be complete chaos.
I agree with that. And then just as a note for the college football playoff this year, there are 5 guaranteed spots, auto bids to the Power 4 champs and the highest rated group of 5 team. Yeah. So when you see these rankings come out and you ask the question after they're seeded, why is Iowa State or BYU ahead of Penn State, for example, if they win this game and they're undefeated? The reason why is because people think they're better. The reason why is because we had to put some spots aside so everybody could feel like they had a stake in the 12-team playoff. You like that, right? I can see this is your. Did you come up with those rules? Wouldn't be my rules. You know how I am. Yeah. Chaos. All right, man. It's gonna be chaos this weekend. It's Florida, Georgia too, right? I mean, gosh, I know. What a good weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend. I think we got a lot of games. Certainly will be a lot to talk about, not only on Through the Whistle as you're listening to us here, but also on the Big College Football Show, which you can check out on CHSN. But that'll do it for us over here. That's my guy, Jake Butt, one of the best in the business. Make sure you check him out here on the Big Ten Network. I'm Joshua Perry again on CHSN. You can check me out on NBC as well. And we will see you beautiful people later on. Yeah.